There is a provision that would grant ministers sweeping new powers to exempt any entity, corporation, or individual from almost any federal law, with the exception of the criminal code.
I don't know what law what law you're referring to.
Nice try, Steve. Most people think that Bill C-15, or the Budget Implementation Act, is just about money. But in a previous video, we showed how Mark Carney buried provisions that allow ministers to exempt companies from almost any federal law except the criminal code. This week, the Finance Committee pressed Steve McKinnon on why those powers are actually needed and whether Brookfield could benefit from a high-speed rail project that the Liberals have been touting since the election began in early 2025. Let's take a look.
The Budget Implementation Act includes provisions related to the Alto High Frequency Rail Project, a multi-billion-dollar initiative that will involve significant procurement, financing structures, and long-term public contracts. Now, given the serious and well-documented concerns about the potential conflicts of interest involving Brookfield, including its proximity to the Prime Minister, and its extensive role in global infrastructure financing, can you answer clearly and unequivocally, will Brookfield be barred from bidding on, participating in, advising on, financing, or otherwise benefiting from any aspect of this high-frequency rail project?
What I can tell you is that a private consortium, led by a Canadian pension fund, is the private sector partner. They have a number of other affiliated companies, many world-leading, most of them owned by Canadians, including Air Canada and many, many others. And that is the private sector entity that we have chosen to accompany the Crown Corporation that's developing this project.
But given the serious concerns about Brookfield specifically, can you please confirm clearly whether they will be involved or not?
I have no idea whether Brookfield will be
So
involved.
you're not preventing it from being involved, given the potential conflicts of interest here? So they could technically
I have no
be
knowledge of that.
able to participate?
I think that question is purely hypothetical.
No, it's actually quite simple. Will they be able to participate and benefit from this project or not? Based on the way that you have structured it.
The way we have structured it is with a private sector consortium led by a Canadian pension fund.
Yeah, but it is Brookfield who has a potential conflict of interest, very clearly documented. It is not just another private sector company. Will they be able to participate or not?
There is currently no involvement by Brookfield in this project.
But they could be involved.
Well, yes, but Joe's Plumbing, who lives on my street, could also be involved.
So the answer is yes, they could be involved. There's nothing there. Okay.
You know, it's funny. You ask a simple question, but when a Liberal is sitting there, you almost never get a straight answer. And Steve McKinnon tried to wiggle his way around and, say, well, we're talking to the pension fund. Well, that question's hypothetical. Well, yeah, a lot of questions are hypothetical, especially when you're asking about a project that hasn't started yet and about a project that is going to cost billions and billions and billions of dollars of taxpayer money, and a project that may involve companies that are involved in Mark Carney's investment portfolio. Oh, well, it's purely hypothetical. Actually, it's not, given Brookfield's reach and Brookfield's investments and Brookfield's ties to Mark Carney, which are no secret. They've been covered everywhere. It's pretty clear from Mark Carney's own disclosure, and everyone's covered this, that he has stock options in Brookfield. Full stop. That's the only thing you need to know here. So if Brookfield is going to be given any sort of benefit on any government project, then that's a conflict of interest for Mark Carney. It shows that he's going to be benefiting from, in his investment portfolio, from deferred interest payments, from the actual stock options. Like, he benefits directly if Brookfield is involved in anything when it comes to the Canadian government that they benefit from. This is why the Conservatives have been pushing in committee to ask witnesses, like, wouldn't it be just easier if Mark Carney divested all of his assets? That way there is no concern. Wouldn't that be simpler? Remember back in the election when he was asked about stocks and options and all this stuff, and he was like, I own nothing. I own nothing. Oh, you poor baby. Yeah, you own nothing but a whole bunch of real estate, and you own nothing but millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of stock options and investments. Yeah, a lot of Canadians would settle for that nothing as well. But then Sandra Cabena presses McKinnon over and over and over again until he finally says, well, Bob the plumber done it. I'm pretty sure Bob the plumber isn't going to be able to invest or benefit from a multi-billion-dollar rail project. So it actually indicts McKinnon's earlier response. Well, that's purely hypothetical. No, it's actually a realistic question. Your response of Bob the plumber being involved in a multi-billion-dollar rail project, that's the problematic response, McKinnon. But thank you for telling everybody that there's nothing that the government is doing to prevent Brookfield from being involved or benefiting from this project.
So the other question that I have is, in this bill C-15, there is a provision that would grant ministers sweeping new powers to exempt any entity, corporation, or individual from almost any federal law, with the exception of the criminal code. Why did you feel that that was needed?
I don't know what law what law you're referring to.
So it's Section 208 of Division 5, Part 5, where it is allowing any minister to exempt any entity from any provision of any law for which the minister is responsible for a period of up to 3 years, with the exception of the criminal code.
Yeah, that's the law that we both voted for. It's C5. It's the Building Canada Act.
So this was included in the Budget Implementation Act. This was not included when the budget was presented in November. It was not debated exclusively, separately. It is here. So why do you feel that you and the other ministers around you, as well as the Prime Minister, need the power to exempt anybody from any federal law except for the criminal code?
Nice try, Steve. No, that wasn't in Bill C-5, Steve. That was your first attempt. That was your first attempt to allow ministers to essentially ignore just about any piece of legislation in Canada. That was the first attempt until the Conservatives completely gutted that. This is the second attempt. This was in Bill C-15, 10 bills later. So either you're not paying attention, you have no idea what's in your legislation, or you're being deliberately obtuse. Probably number 3, maybe a combination of all of them, but probably number 3. So playing dumb isn't going to help you here. And I love that he's like, well, I'm not familiar with that. Okay, let me read it for you. Let me read it for all of you. This is what Sandra is referring to. Subject to subsections 3 and 7, a minister may, by order of a specified validity period of not more than 3 years, and on any terms that the minister considers appropriate, exempt an entity from the application of a provision of an act of parliament, except the criminal code, if the minister is responsible for the act, etc., etc. So an act of parliament is law. That's what that is. So they're exempt from virtually any law in Canada aside from the criminal code. We talked about this in a previous video. And if you haven't seen that, that'll be at the end of this video so you can get some context. But Steve's just playing dumb here. Sorry, buddy. People are actually paying attention to your legislation, and we don't like what we're finding.
This is specifically designed at accelerating the progress and the ability to move, plan, contemplate, and build large projects.
Do recognize that now individuals or corporations are not going to have any interest in changing law. They will just lobby you personally because you have that power.
We had an open process in terms of procuring the partnership that I referred to earlier. It's called Cadence. That followed all of the openness and transparency requirements that are established in Canadian law. We are not proposing here significant modification of applicable law in respect to acquisition of property. We are proposing to shorten it, though.
What? Oh, all of a sudden I know what this is. Really? This is just, this is just to allow us to move at, at large speeds. Well, hold on. Hold on here. You don't need to be exempting these people from law. You don't need to be exempting companies from laws. Like, this is what the Liberals are trying to justify here, right? This is their creep of centralizing more power within the government. Oh, well, it's for your own safety. Oh, it's because we're trying to make things safer. Oh, it's just, we're trying to move faster. So then why don't you change laws that allow companies to move faster without having them be exempt from laws? But this is the Liberal way. We just need to give ourselves more power. Just trust us. It'll be fine. Haven't we done great for the last 10 years? Right. Because I want you to be exempting Brookfield from any law in Canada aside from the Criminal Code, including the Conflict of Interest Act. Are you kidding me? But no, this is what they want Canadians to believe. It's all good.
In terms of the Budget Implementation Act, we're talking about several $billion, and I'm concerned by the answer that you gave earlier in English to my colleague in terms of the possible conflicts of interest with Brookfield and the possibility of investing in the project. And you said that there's no there are no constraints being put so that Brookfield can't participate in the project. We have laws that govern that project. There is an ethical framework that exists in Canada, in the Parliament of Canada, and our public procurement, that prevents conflicts of interest. So I can ensure that there will not be any conflict of interest. I can assure your colleague that there will be no conflicts of interest. But you can't guarantee that Brookfield will not invest in such a project. I can guarantee that there will not be any conflict of interest. I can guarantee that there will be no conflict of interest in the construction of this project.
Well, it's going to be easy to guarantee that there will be no conflict of interest if a minister exempts Brookfield from the conflict of interest law. That's a really easy way to do it. Because if they're exempt from the conflict of interest law, then hooray! Then they're not in a conflict of interest, are they, Steve? But this is the whole problem. This is the problem. And what Canadians need to understand is this is not an isolated pattern. Most of you watching this already know this. And it's been commented on this by Democracy Watch, by Duff Conacher, by Desiree Fixler, by lots of people who don't even have any skin in the game. Ottawa, particularly the Liberals, have been engaging in a pattern that centralizes more and more power within the government, particularly the Prime Minister's office, so they can act with impunity. So why would a minister, and all they have to do, they just have to believe it's in the public interest. That's the requirement. Why do we need ministers being able to give entities, individuals, or companies legal immunity? Like, a minister could potentially say, I'm going to give Mark Carney an exemption on the conflict of interest law because I think that's going to be in the public interest. And I'm going to give Brookfield an exemption for the conflict of interest law because I believe it's in the public interest. And that's all they have to do. Folks, this is why committee is so important. This is why the opposition is so important. This is why independent media is so important. Because you think you're going to hear about this on CBC or CTV or Global? I don't think so.